think the biggest opportunity in ESG is to unisolate it. I think too often it's too separate from the business. So the more that we can make ESG part of every aspect of the business, then the bigger the impact that it can have, the bigger the mind space that it can use, and the bigger the results that will be. So make it part of procurement, make it part of marketing, make it part of sales, make it part of manufacturing. Sort of like this integration of ESG into your everyday business flow is very important. And technology, being able to have real-time data, being able to have real-time connections into all of this, it's both a mixture of data and good software that allows this to happen. So I think that the opportunity is to mix ESG better with your business, and technology can be a facilitator, a tool that allows this to happen.
Makes perfect sense. Olu?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna talk about it from Reedi's perspective. So something that we did in Reedi, we rent these capsules to people every single day to access power in Nigeria, and it's an admin device. Also requires putting some kind of telephone infrastructure. We wanted to measure the emission offset of this system. So in Nigeria, there's a ton of like millions of DC generators, petrol generators that people use across board. So our main competition was the DC generators actually. People were using this generator. It's quite expensive, but like you need to be able to also, how do you measure what exactly is the economic and even the environmental impact on that lens? And what we did was we build a whole software. Like the software is called Tempone, and what we did was the software allows us to automatically measure the emission offset based on what's like, if somebody ran a capsule, we can always tell you this is the energy you are going to use. If you actually use the same amount of energy, if you have to use the same what's it called? If you have to use a diesel generator, you're going to use this amount of power. It's going to cost you this. So customers are able to see like the differentials, and that allows them to say, okay, I'm going to do this instead of doing that. I'm going to do this. And we also have to measure that, because when we're talking to our investors, that was a critical piece of what they want to see. They want to see what's the emission offset, what's the economic impact, and every other, including and every other thing that could come from that. So I think ESG's technology is actually very critical when it comes to what's called synchronize those information, because we have like basically a lot of like silos when it comes to opportunities especially in emerging markets. What technology allows us to do is to harmonize that, organize it, and more importantly also present it so that people could actually appreciate the problem and also even appreciate the solution that you're trying to like bring in.
Absolutely. And Aditya, over to you.
Yeah, so just to give some context, right? So you have about 30% of your global GHG emissions comes from agriculture. So from an overall transition standpoint, agriculture is a key industry that everybody is trying to tackle. And the technologies that are there are not necessarily digital. There are lots of different high-end, different kind of technologies that are playing a role. I'll talk about 4 quick examples that I have seen, and some of them Jiva is also doing. So one is on helping farmers adopt better practices. So a lot of the time with smallholder farmers, there's a knowledge gap. And what we do is essentially we have created a digital product where farmers can easily use and interact with the product and get advisory on how to better grow their crops. This can be simple advice on like crop rotation and things like that, and more complicated stuff as to, okay, this is my disease on my plant. What is the kind of pesticide I should use and how much? The second example there's also a big trend in the industry now to look at options which can basically biological solutions versus chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides, which help make the soil fertility better. So that's the second piece. Third is reducing post-harvest losses. So in smallholder farmers, there's a lot of loss that happens because the post-harvest processing is not done well, or the storage conditions are not good. And that's also something that Jiva provides as an offering to smallholder farmers. And that is a key area that we help reduce crop loss and essentially then abate losses. And finally, there's a big piece around land uh, conservation or forest conservation, because a lot of times what happens with in these emerging markets is there is forest land, but farmers would remove that forest, just basically burn it down or something, and use it to grow crops because they need some kind of livelihood. So there, system like Jiva can provide sustainability, and we offer that as a value to our customers and try and package it as a more premium commodity, really, than what other suppliers are able to give it, because you don't really know where it. So, like, those are the four examples that the technology really is playing a role.
Thank you. And what I've heard from our different panelists right now is, there's multiple sides to tackle the question, right? Depending on the type of technology that you're implementing, there's a digitization process that may come into play, right? So how are you collecting certain data? How are you analyzing some of that? How are you reporting it back to your relevant stakeholders? But the underlying theme that I really liked, and I want to take a double dive on, is around the education aspect that comes when you're trying to educate your stakeholders, not just on the importance of ESG, sustainability, et cetera, but on how do you actually get the most mileage, right, out of the technology, out of these new best practices. So, and you are, obviously the three of you are customer facing, you're having these conversations with investors. Can you talk a little bit about what that challenge is? And obviously these are different regions. Really curious to hear your perspectives on kind of what is the hardest thing that you've seen when you're trying to educate, say, an investor, hardest thing that you try to do, you try to educate a prospective customer. And Olu, we're gonna start with you with this one.
Yeah, I think for me, coming from Nigeria, in the Nigerian space, it's so just to be fair to the investors as well. It's so being a technical person for me. I have like over 15 engineers that work with me, and like we understand ourselves, right? Like some of these things are like what to put, what not to put, how you communicate information over the cloud, what to analyze. It's not something that everybody that doesn't have the same background probably will be able to interpret. So what we try to do is that we write like we publish company papers right now. So we publish very simple, clear papers that makes it very easy for like the average let's say financial stakeholder to absorb. On the consumer end as well, we try to do door-to-door education. Is still very crude, but we have like a couple of like simple snippets videos that allows customers. I mean, for us, we have what we call ambassadors that helps us like rent the Reeddi capsule. So we are talking about all these small mom and pop shop that also help us, and it's very important for them to understand what they're also trying to do. So what we try to do is to make sure we go the crude way to like educate them. But when it comes to the other side, especially the finance people, it's always trying to have like some papers, some clear presentation, some clear decks that clearly analyze the technology and also explain how those data are collected. Because I mean, one of the biggest challenge in the emerging market is always like transparency. Like, how do if you tell me you're offsetting like 18 kilograms of CO2 for every single system you do, what exactly does that mean? I mean, I was having a conversation with a consortium from Switzerland last year, and they were trying to they were trying to introduce carbon credits to us. And the big question was that how do we even verify that? How do we verify every single thing to the last user? And I was like, yeah, we can do that, but it's just like it also makes everything very expensive. So I mean, I think one of the biggest challenge that also happens in emerging market is also like the more you try to over-engineer some of the technology, the more expensive it becomes. And you're talking about consumers that are very price sensitive, right? So I mean, there's always a gray area where everybody kind of try to like balance up. I mean, what we try to do sometimes is to invite investors to the field, try to take them through what exactly is going on, so they have a clear understanding of like this is what is happening, as opposed to like just coming to present to you via like slides or something. But I think the beauty of the world right now is that there's a lot of information and it's easy for people seems now be understanding what's going on. And more importantly, there's also like there's a lot of like, especially on the carbon side, the environmental side, a lot of people rushing into some of the emerging markets. So there's a lot of like education in that lens. So it's easier to just like communicate to investors and make it like just very obvious to them that okay, this is what we are doing, this is how we're doing it. They ask a couple of questions, they become for sightseeing and co, and they most of the time always get it. And even if they don't, they can always like follow up and follow up and follow up.
Love the example of like taking your investors like out in the field, like actually see it. Like, love that one. Aditya, I see enthusiastic head nod. I'm going to pass it over to you next.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree on a lot of these points that Olu was making. The investor community is still, at least in our case as well, it's very difficult. We need to educate them on how the industry works and what kind of technology is feasible and viable in these areas that these smallholder farmers are. So we also try and like take the investors to the ground to actually see how things are happening and then make an assessment of, because some of the asks can be completely not possible or not viable in these communities. And trying to have transparent data is a key thing for us as well. We also try and make sure that all the traceability information that we provide is like completely available as a dashboard or things like that, to give some comfort to the investor community that this makes sense. Carbon credits is something actually we thought about, but we actually pulled out because we realized that the amount of work that we need to do to prove that carbon credits are really real is just too onerous, and it would not make business sense to get into it. So the other, I mean, the bigger challenge on the other side is that to convince the farmer to change these practices, you need to give them certain financial incentives. Because when you change practices, there's a chance of yield loss. You're taking some risk, right? And there's not a lot of financial incentive that we can create for them. So that's another key challenge that we keep battling. That while we want to do more, it's very hard from a business fundamental standpoint to actually drive that change. So technology, I would say, is still lesser of an issue. The bigger issue is financial incentives have not yet been properly figured out for this particular community, and that's the challenge that we face on this side.
Yeah, I mean, what you're mentioning around like structuring the right programs that incentivize the right behavior, right? Like that's cross-border. Like I remember Latin America, Colombia was trying to get lower income families to send their kids to school, and some of that came in the form of microcredits, but they were targeted to like help develop critical skills, critical whether it's agriculture or like manufacturing, to like sort of drive some of that behavior. But to your point, Aditya, like that requires a level of coordination between different sectors that can be hard, and it can also be very hard to scale. So absolutely tracking there. And then Max, over to you.
Yeah. So focus a little bit more on customer buy-in, like how do you get that education and that customer buy-in? I think from our perspective, especially focusing on my experience with ClimateAI and selling weather and climate insights into the agricultural space, we find that understanding what we like to call their climate journey, or like their ESG journey, and try to meet them where they are. Some people are at the very initial steps of the journey, more around interest, or maybe discovering a little bit of the tools that are out there. Some might be implementing or maybe scaling it, or polishing and building reviews of systems that exist. So I think it's important to understand where in the journey someone is before you communicate, or before you start this this sort of discussions, and then some general best practices of success are early wins, or early successes, being able to drive to some ESG proof of value in the business, ESG win as soon as possible, early, ideally in the first few interactions, in the first few months, tends to create a lot of positive buy-in. Case studies with similar customers, word of mouth works very well. And then another strategy as a whole that we have followed a lot at ClimateAI is vertical integration. Make sure you understand a particular business, a particular niche market incredibly well, that you can talk the language, that you can understand, for example, seed production, where we went all the way and hyper-focused on seed productions, onions, soy, sorghum, wheat, and understand the details also helps, just being able to understand where they're coming from, what language they're speaking, what are their constraints. So I think those have been some of my my big takeaways in trying to talk to customers and get them to integrate ESG solutions into their day-to-day workflows.
That's awesome. And by the way, we're doing great on time, so we're gonna have ample time for questions. But again, if you guys want to jump in at any point, just raise your hand. Like actually raise so I know that I'm gonna have some blind spots literally with my glasses, so help me out. So one of the other things that you've all mentioned, you sort of like left some breadcrumbs around like your go-to-market strategy, right? And I've heard you talk a lot about having these conversations directly with customers. You've talked a little bit about the investor side. But for something like ESG or again, we're talking something like agriculture or power, you know, so far the unspoken voice in the room is government. So I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, like, have you actively pursued any kind of like formal or informal partnerships with local, state, federal governments, number one? Number two, if you haven't gone with like that domestic route, I mean, we just have like a guy from the IMF here today, right? Like, are there international channels that you've tried to explore as a way to expand either the reach of the business and or to structure those incentives, right? And then I'm using this question as a seeding for the following one. So Max, I'm gonna start with you this time.
Yeah. So an issue with governments, at least from the perspective of early companies, think seed, Series A companies, it is the sales cycle around governments tends to be particularly long. So getting that started, you tend to need to have a certain maturity in your company, or at least experience in it, to be able to. So while now ClimateAI is engaging, it had to wait just until it had a certain size and weight to be able to engage closer with government contracts, to engage closer with nonprofits. So that's been probably the biggest constraint in our experience. But on the other side, that they're great partners. They definitely understand the need. They definitely understand how to then apply and distribute it. And in terms of research, you can think of grants, SBIR, different grants. I think there's a lot of interest, and the broader policies around ESG definitely give wind to our sails. So there definitely is more indirect benefits and indirect interactions. And I think as companies mature and grow, the direct interactions grow. So that's my 2 cents.
Yep, I cannot agree more with the long sales cycle whenever you're trying to sell anything into any kind of government agency. So tracking there. Aditya, over to you, and then go with Olu.
So I'll break it into 2 parts. One is, so Jiva is currently operational in Indonesia. Indonesia is our main market, right? So if I talk about the local government, in ESG, we find a lot more receptiveness for S versus E. So they're more concerned about the farmer's livelihood and are we able to help increase farmer livelihood? That's a politically charged topic and people get very excited about it. But environment factors is not as big a thing yet. And I also agree with the point that Max was just making, that it's very hard to sell directly. We get some support from the government, which is helpful, but it's not really direct support. It's more like at a local level, you get some support to help run some of the operations that you're running. On the external world, so yeah, we do work with IFC. We are working with a institute in Germany, which is helping us run a with a pilot with Exact Climate on agri insurance with smallholder farmers. So we try and work with folks who are more attuned to it from Europe or the US, but it takes a long time to get something going for sure. Yeah.
And Olu?
Yeah, in my own world, so I sincerely try to not even I try to not interact too much with government. Although we've had like I've run into a couple of them, especially the Nigerian federal government. So I try to be just as under the radar as possible, and that's because of history of people that businesses actually like. I mean, in my world, Nigeria, the more noise you make, the more problem you get actually. So you have to be like very very careful. And so what do we do is we are we just try to do what we need to do. We've got people reach out from the presidency, we've got people from the former minister of environment, but it's always just like we are always very careful because the interactions can be positive or negative, and sometimes it just brings you to limelight, and that limelight can be quite challenging. Like Mark said, the what's it called, the infrastructure and the resources you need to manage the limelight becomes like unnecessary, like among us. So we try to just go as I mean, we're in consumer tech, so we try to just focus on what we are doing with the consumer. I mean, we sell energy to the consumer. Nobody stops us. We get basically the license that we need to get on the local, state, and government and federal level. We pay our taxes. We do all the core registration that we need to do as far as logistics is concerned, and that's what we do. We try to be as I mean, for me, I don't even interact at all with them. I basically have a general counsel that she's the one that does all those. I try not to just even get into like government stuff, but on the developmental agency, like Aditya said, I've worked with like we had conversation with IFC as well. Spoke to like USADF, USAID. The developmental agency is very very different when it comes to their approach, but they are looking for totally most of the time the different stuff. So those ones are always like they are more beneficial engagement. And also because I mean Nigeria, if things are not politically motivated, sometimes government don't really care. So for us, it's like okay, these communities they don't have power, then maybe like a House of Rep member or somebody representing them is saying, "Oh, come to this community and come and do this," and you'll be surprised. Some of them even want you to. I mean, during the days of bread, some of them actually want you to sponsor it yourself. So the mental thing is that okay, there's probably going to be a future incentive if you actually are able to sponsor it yourself. Then you sponsor it, probably like slap my name on it, and so at the end of the day, you're like, "Oh, I don't want to get involved in this mess because it can be very very interesting." That would
Yeah. And one of the things that you've all sort of touched on, and this is why I asked this question, is around, hey, like these are difficult issues, and depending on where you're at, they can be politically charged, right? And that varies depending on, again, local, state, federal, international. If you break down ESG, like which part of ESG do you care most about? Which ones do you not want to touch on? I mean, we've certainly seen that here in the U.S. Some of that in Mexico, where hey, like this is starting to really infringe on the business ability to perform, right? Like this is a barrier to like economic development. These arguments are obviously being tossed around. So from your experience, like what is the biggest challenge when trying to push for some of these innovative technologies and products and strategies? Are they coming primarily from a lack of understanding of kind of what it entails? Versus, hey, like, no, there's an ideological barrier here that we need to fight against to make sure that we're having the conversation we want to have. And I'm going to open it up, like whoever wants to take it first.
I can start. So during the early days of Reedi, people are not used to renting. So like Nigeria is a place where everybody buys everything. So it's basically no. I mean, we are doing NIN right now, and it's getting some traction. But like people are not used to like a renting thing. So everybody just buy. You want your wife a phone, you buy it. So we are going to the market to say, okay, we are going to give you these systems. You are going to rent it. You are going to return it. So we are battling with a lot of like cultural issues. So like maintenance. I mean, the guy used the first capsules that we drop into Nigeria was, they basically blew the two. So somebody just plugged an ion and blew it off. Like, I mean, it's not my property, so why should I care? But we had to start probably putting ourselves in the customer's shoes. So I started putting some restriction on the technology itself. We like on our capsule right now, we have a kind of a mini, kind of a sticker on it that tells you what it should do, what it should not do. We started documenting, so we do like we do like a quick KYC for customers. So automatically, once we take your picture and we know that you know we have your picture, you know we have a couple of things, you don't run away with our systems. We started like putting tracking. So you basically have to sometimes have to build systems around like direct consumer behavior. I mean for me, my world is a different world because customers need energy. So it's actually not a function of like I'm not gonna embrace it. It's something that when we drop it, they embrace it. But the challenge is now, how do you make sure they embrace it in such a way that it's gonna add value to you and also add value to them. So it's always navigating through those like cultural maze. And I think another one that was very critical that we're battling with right now is currency instability. The currency, it's a mess that you have to sometimes, you're basically readjusting pricing almost every 3 months. And customers are concerned, but I mean, we also have to like, I mean, we have investments that we have to return. So we have to like start shifting. And basically government nobody even cares whether we are shifting or not. Everybody just make declarations. So it's one of the biggest issue we're having right now, but we are finding a way to solve it a step at a time. And I think, yeah, the third one is also like local regulation, because you basically don't know what you don't know. And that's why I said for us, what we do at Reeddi is that we try our best to, I don't know if it's good, but to keep a low profile. I mean, I spoke with one of my mentors who was the CEO of Unilever Nigeria. The advice was just go as do your job. Don't try to make too much noise. And because of that, you'll capture a lot of terrain without anybody knowing your strengths. And that's because sometimes strength becomes a problem that can be politically used against you. So for us, those regulations, we try to just move as fast as we can, stay under the radar where we can. I mean, there's a point you can't stay. Like we had people from the presidency reach out to us earlier last year. We were like, we don't even know how they got to know about us. So it's people are still gonna know, but at least once you are not the one blowing the horn and you don't start triggering a lot of like stuff from like political people, I mean, things are always generally fine.
Yeah, like fly under the radar, break enough to like not make too much of a noise, but enough that you're still kind of crushing it. Makes perfect sense. Jance, let's go next.
I can go because I wanted to build on this add value concept that he mentioned. And I think one of the big challenges is that you need to add value. But basically, it's this repeated concept of are you solving a pain point or is it a vitamin? And any business, any startup needs to make sure that they are solving a painful issue for a customer and finding this way to add real value. And ESG and most things at a very high level tend to be or look as vitamins. And it isn't until you land it, until you really discover where the pain point lies, and transforming this sort of like ESG into a very highly pressing problem, either be it a need for particular energy, be it a need for climate information, or weather information, be it a need for better processes. It's this landing of it in a high pain point area that transforms it from ESG into a business. And I think that's an important and a perpetual challenge for businesses and for the entire space.
Yep, 100%.
I think pretty much the same for us. Like, so ESG is critical for us because our industry is such, and because we work closely with smallholder farmers, kind of has to get embedded in our business. But in the end, the areas where we are able to make an impact, a positive impact, in those areas, it's financially beneficial to do so. So there is, like, as Max was and everybody was saying there's a clear pain point that we are solving, and that's why we are making money out in that particular transaction. But it happens so that it helps the environment as well. So all the solutions that we bring to our customers, they must make financially better sense for them, and that's what gets through. And otherwise, it's very difficult to do anything on ESG standalone, obviously. And I think the other thing is that I think broadly, at least in Southeast Asia, um, the government action is still not there. There is a feeling among this particular part of the world that um, there is like we need to grow, and economic imperative is higher rather than the environmental imperative. Still, that narrative is obviously is shifting over time, but that narrative has not yet shifted. So you don't see like tax implications or some of those more aggressive things which can make change the industry faster. I don't anticipate them happening in this part of the world for at least 10 years or so, or 5 to 10 years at least.
Got it. And we're gonna move into the rapid fire portion of our panel in advance of the questions. So, gents, quick answers, like 30 seconds, 45 seconds max. I'm gonna start with Aditya. Okay, here we go. Thing that you're most excited in the short term that you guys are working on.
The combined harvesters that we are bringing for paddy farmers and helping them reduce their loss in harvest.
Great, Max.
Machine vision. I think lately LLMs, like natural language process, blew up. But machine vision and being able to analyze video and images and bring that information is the thing that has me the most excited.
Nice. Olu?
I mean, integrated logistics. So,
Wow, that was fast.
yeah.
Great. Cracking through these. Next one, vision. What's the most exciting thing that you see in this space happening in the next 5, 10, 20 years? Olu.
I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of what's it called? There's a lot to do in emerging markets, specifically as far as ESG is concerned. I think, like I said, I also mentioned that carbon pricing, selling, and whatever is being a lot of conversation that is going on that lens. People still don't probably clearly understand it. We also don't clearly understand it as well. But there's also like vast amount of opportunities, especially for Nigeria, Africa. Energy is still very huge. Transportation is still very huge, especially those key pain points. Like for me, we try to just focus on the core, like energy, transportation. It's super huge. I mean, and it's also a very young population, so people are very open to like adopting a lot of like some of those services as long as it can be brought to them in a way that is creative and has like financial incentives to them.
Great, Max.
So I'm it's been a long time coming, but I'm very excited of the digitization of emerging markets. I think things are finally starting to enter this ones and zeros and everything that comes with it, because that's the first step. And once we start digitizing farming practices, once we start digitizing manufacturing practices, once we start digitizing everything, software, AI, observability, like so much becomes possible that I'm very, very excited of this wave of digitization that's finally coming across the emerging market.
Nice. Aditya?
I think what Max said. Yeah, couldn't have said it better.
Great. And last rapid fire. Words of advice, right? We have a really, really nice full room here of folks that are either thinking about going into the space or would like to stay involved. Like one of the things I learned at Darden is that you can follow your passion even if it's not your full-time job, because Darden trains you really well to do that. So words of advice for anyone who's thinking about either moving into the ESG space, as a consultant in tech or, in the startup realm. And Max, I'm gonna start with you.
So maybe an advice of why you should do it. If you plant a flag and try to do something very hard, Great people. It's easy to build a very talented team. It's easy to attract interest of peers, of mission-driven peers. So sometimes doing something that's hard, something that might even look impossible, if you can do it with a good team of people, if you can plant that flag, if you can be very mission-driven, it ends up being much easier than doing something that seemingly seems easier, but if you can't rally people around it, then you can't do it. So plant that flag and start the rally, and things will happen. So that's my experience, and hopefully it'll be yours as well.
Yeah. So my own is resilience. Like once you know you want to be in any space, just realistically give it like 4 to 5 years before you actually start seeing some real results, especially in those in emerging markets. Like the Reedi that we have in 2020 is different from the Reedi we have right now. Like we're like probably 1,000 times more stable than we are then. And the beauty of it is that the more you go into this market, the more you unlock, the more you see more opportunities that are buried. Because actually, as you solve a problem, that problem unearths in probably another problem. And most of the time, you are able to vertically integrate your solution to solve that problem more seamlessly, leveraging on your probably existing either data or customer base or something. So it's a very interesting space. It's quite challenging. It requires some doggedness and resilience. But I mean, I think with those two, there's always like a lot of huge value to unlock.
Love it. And Aditya, you want to close us off?
I'd say that actually I would suggest combining it with something, some industry passion or something else. Like ESG alone is, I think, a tough place to be. Would recommend combining it with like for like on the AI side, like Max was talking about how digital is really playing a big role, or if you are into energy transition, what Ulu was talking about, something on those lines, because ESG, if you make it as macro as ESG, is too broad. It's very difficult to pick anything.
Love it. So we got vision, we've got resilience, and we've got being tactical and laser focused. Gents, thank you so much. We're gonna open it up for questions now. Yes, here in the center.
My question is to Max. Hi, Max. My name is Lohit. So a few days back, there was an article by Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you got some time to look at it. It was about the energy consumption of AI in general, and how whatever the growth plan of NVIDIA is, and basis that there would be, in Netherlands alone, there would be 50 gigawatts of excess energy that you would require to power the AI systems now. And that's actually equivalent to what the consumption of Netherlands itself is at this point of time. Because you're looking at climate change and the new, the requirement of electricity that will be because of AI, how do you bring a balance into this, and how do you solve that with AI?
It gets tricky. I think any growth, any progress has a degree of consumption, and AI is probably one of those biggest ones. I think on one hand, I'm very excited about the potential. Like with AI, we can model fluid dynamics. It brings us one step closer to fission, to actually being able to develop better and new tools to actually make energy cheaper. It'll help us design the next generation of chips that will likely make things more efficient, but at the same time, our energy consumptions keep growing. So there isn't an easy either stop it or don't do it. It's always going to be a matter of trying to find the right balance, and probably the balance in terms of focus, the balance in terms of what are people working towards build? Are we working towards making things just be more efficient and faster, or are we making them to be more sustainable? So we can definitely do both, and we should do both. We just need to make sure that we are not just doing one and forgetting the other, and trying to keep a balance, because there's an immense possibility of using AI to drive sustainability, to drive efficiency, to make things lower. in terms of energy consumption. We just need to care about it. We just need to invest our time and energy into making that happen.
Yeah, 100%. I think we need Olu to come up with better power systems, and we need people to use less AI power to do like make NFTs. So we're on the right track there. We got time probably for another 1 or 2 questions. Yes, you're in the center.
Hi, so my name is Ruth. I'm president of the Food and Ag Club, so I'm so glad you're all here talking. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, so it's so interesting hearing you talk about the education piece, but especially for farmers, I wonder, is tech helping with the capital requirements to make these changes? Is that something you thought about in your outreach? And in your experience on the ground, is there enough capital to support these changes? Like, what is it like for the farmers?
So maybe I'll take this one. So I think it's a real problem. At least for smallholder farmers, the financing is not yet figured out at all. I think there's been some interesting work that's coming out of the US for helping the larger farmers. Because what happens is you need to make some upfront investment. Imagine just like you have to change your irrigation system, let's say, just for the sake of example. That takes certain cost upfront. And also then there is in some of these changes, uh, the yield risk is also quite big, right? So to make those transitions, the farmer needs to get protection, and we do not have good financing solutions to help them actually get this done. And as I was saying, that's one of the biggest reasons why we don't have more wider adoption of some of the technologies that already exist, which can help the world and which can also be good financial decisions. But you need to be able to figure out a way to help the farmer in that initial bit much better than what we are currently able to do.
So, like especially the climate piece and the farmer education piece, are you partnering at all? I mean, we talked about how tricky it is with governments and NGOs, like, and those partnerships are really complicated. But is that an avenue for financing? Is the private market able to provide financing? How do we bridge this gap and put this education into practice?
The only places where I have seen that capital is with USAID and with IFC. So these are the kind of agencies I've seen it. But even then, it is not well. I mean, it comes as a term loan mostly, and it's not really the kind of capital that can help the smallholder farmers. It's not structured well. Other than that, actually, there is a lot of supposed funding that banks need to do within the climate agenda, but mostly it's like energy transition and some other spaces are easier to fund than this one. So I think the education of the farmer is also relatively easy, but I mean, is possible. I've seen it done, but the financing right now is just not. There's no good solutions out there. At least I have not seen them for smallholder farmers.
So what I'm hearing is that there's a market opportunity for someone from Darden to like come up with the right financial instruments to like make that happen, right? So good for them, pun intended. We got time for one final question. Great. Well, again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much to our panelists, Max, Aditya, Olu. Thank you for being here, and to be continued.